Good evening. I hope you're all doing well, learning Maseches Taanis, Daf Yomi, and we will be starting at the bottom of Testament Bays, right after the parentheses, Kiman Ozla. This coming Wednesday, I have an in and out flight from Detroit. I plan to be here on time. If there is something that comes up, I'll let you know and then pre-record and post. I don't anticipate that. I should be landing in the sixes or the sevens or something. In Wednesday in 2 days. Yeah. Okay, here we go. We had previously learned about a machlokes. Does rain come from the heavens or does rain come from the ocean? We learned that yesterday. So let's ask a couple of questions that debate this. Some Mari Makomos that question respective sheets of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Testament Bay, 7-8 lines from the bottom. Kiman Azla Hadifsi. Like whom does the machlokes of Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer go like in regards to the following pasuk? Tichsi mashke harim me'ali Yosab. That which waters the mountains is from on high. Omer Rabbi Yochanan me'ali Yosab shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kiman, who is that like? That's obviously like Rabbi Yoshua, who says that rain comes from up in the heavens. But Rabbi Eliezer, what would you do with that? He says, no. Kevin the salke lahasam, since they evaporated and they went up there. Mashkam ali Yosef kari. We call it like it's up there, but it's not actually from there. It's from the ocean. And then says the Gemara, it has to be that way. 4 lines from the bottom. If you don't say that, then sometimes, as we know from the pasuk avak ve'afar min hashamayim, we know that sometimes there's avak, there's dust ve'afar. How does that end up in min hashamayim? How does the pasuk even refer to that? It must be Ella. Kavan de midle lahasam, since they floated up there, the wind carried them. Min hashamayim karilei. It therefore has the name of min hashamayim. Therefore hachanami. Kavan de salke lahasam, since the water evaporated up to the heavens. Me'ali Yosef, quote, karilei. That is what it's called, is up from the heavens from up there. But really, the Maisa water does come from the ocean, and that's one way to understand their machlokas as it relates to this pasuk. Let's try again. Keman azlaha de amar Reb Chanina, kones kaned mehayam nosein be'otzaros tehomos. This, of course, is a pasuk we're somewhat familiar with. The gathering of all of the waters be'otzaros tehomos. From the deep wellspring. So says the Gemara, Mi garam le'otzaros sheis malubar. How do we know that it's going to be all filled up to homos from the depths of the oceans? Forget the sky. Kiman, missing word in the Gemara. Who is that like? Rabbi Eliezer. So says the Gemara, that is obviously like the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer, that everything comes from the depths of the oceans. But Rabbi Yoshua, how do you understand this pasuk with its explanation from Reb Chanina? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yoshua, Hahu, turning to the top of Yud Amud Aleph, Bibriyaso Shel Olam. That wasn't talking about in general. That was only talking about the creation of the world, and therefore not problematic, because in general he holds that rain comes from the same place he held that rain came from yesterday. All right. The Gemara now jumps into a discussion about Eretz Yisrael.
That's kind of
yeah.
There's scientific proof that they're both right. It actually comes from Shemayim also.
What does that mean? How do you know where the water particles start from? It's cyclical. I mean, the way that we look at it, like when we were
actually some that comes from space into the atmosphere.
From outside of our. Oh, I've never heard of that. All right. So the Gemara has.
The Coming Revolution is the book on science. It has a piece on this.
Fascinating.
I've actually read about that, and what that is the comets that are flying through space that are basically frozen water. The whole comet. It might be miles in diameter.
So
it's just a big ball of water, and as it flies through space, some of it trails off.
Pieces of ice, and then when they get out of the atmosphere, they warm up enough to become a droplet. Fascinating. Who knew? All right, top line, Daf Yomi and Aleph. Thank you very much. Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis have taught us Eretz Yisrael nivreis tchila v'chol ha'olam kulo never levasof. The first that was created was Eretz Yisrael. Aryeh Kaplan speaks about this in his book, and it's quoted in a lot of the Svarim HaKadoshim that just the first physical touch of the world was the rock, right? The dome of the rock is the Evan Shisia, and from there, Nishtas Kol Ha'olam Kula. We learned about this somewhere in Shas, I think. Anyways, the Gemara says that was the first physical creation of the world, and the rest of the world came after. Shne'emar, as the pasuk says, Ad lo asa eretz v'chutzos. That first Eretz Yisrael was made, and then the chutzos were. Eretz Yisrael mashke osa HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'atzmo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who makes it rain in Eretz Yisrael. V'chol olam kula yidei shaliach, and the rest of the world gets a shaliach for the rain. Shne'emar anosein matar al pnei eretz v'sholeach ma'im al pnei chutzos. He is the one who gives rain onto Eretz Yisrael, and he sends someone to give rain to the non-Eretz Yisrael components. Next 5 lines. 5 lines down, Eretz Yisrael shosa meg shamim. The Eretz Yisrael gets actual rainwater. V'chol ha'olam kulo mitamtzis. It gets the leftovers. So Rashi explains this word, third line, mishiure tamtzis, mashe nishar be'avim achar shtiyasam. Whatever's left in the bucket, whatever's left in the clouds, that's what the rest of the world gets. Shenemar, same pasuk as we saw before. I know same matter al pnei eretz v'chule. Eretz Yisrael shoset chila v'chol ha'olam kulo levisof. First, Eretz Yisrael drinks, and then the rest of the world drinks. Shenemar no sein matar al pnei eretz, very similar to the previous Gemara. Mashal la'adam shemegabel es hagvina. This is similar to a person who is making cheese, and when you make cheese, there are the curds, the solid pieces, and there is the whey, the liquid, the clearish liquid that separates itself. Notel es ha'ochel umaniach es apsoles. That Eretz Yisrael, in effect, is similar to the curds. Umaniach es apsoles, and the whey is left for the rest of the countries. That's how the Gemara understands it. Okay, Amar Mar's great shaila and halacha how to make cheese, because the way they used to make cheese was based off of the rennet that was in the stomach lining of an animal. So why isn't it basar b'chalav? What they would do is put milk inside the stomach of an animal. Of course, they just holding each end of the stomach, cut out of the animal, of course, and they would put milk in it. They'd cap it at each end and they'd shake it. It would draw the rennet out. But why isn't that basar b'chalav? That's a good shaila for Hilchos Yerodea. We'll hopefully speak about that at some point. So it says the Gemara 8-9 lines down, 3 lines into the wide lines. Amar Mar. The other day we learned that that according to those who said that we drank salt water, that we drank the ocean water, which was salty, how did it become better? It became better by being evaporated into the clouds, that the clouds would sweeten the water. Minale, how do we know? What a very unique drasha. This is an atypical drasha. Check this out. Chashkas mayim ave shchakim. That's one pasuk, the darkness of the water in the clouds. Uchsiv chash ras mayim ave shchakim. Very similar. Says the Gemara, shkol kaf, take the kaf from the word chashkas, the shadi aresh, and put it next to the resh in chashras, the kari be chach sharas, which is not a word. Chach sharas is similar to hach sharas, the correction of, the improvement of, making kosher of, namely the removal of the salt from the water to therefore make it good. Uchsiv chashras mayim ave shechakim, and then it is no uksiv. Kari be chach sharas. That's how the Gemara understands it. And how does Rabbi Yeshua deal with this? But when we retranslate it, so after we move the letter over, right? After we move the letter over, the chach sharas is really hach sharas. Is how it's meant to be read. So if you look in the Hagos V'Tzionim, he says that that's really how it should be written in the Gemara too. The Tefusim Yeshanim actually wrote hach sharas. That's what he says here. I'll just read the language. Uv'diktuke sofrim kasav d'tzarach lomar kehagirsa bekisve yaru v'tfusim rabim hach sharas with a hey. That's what the Gemara says. But our Gemara presents it as chach sharas. Fine. What does Rabbi Yeshua do with this? This makes sense for Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua, fifth line into the wide lines, Yudam Ad Aleph. What does Rabbi Yeshua do? Bahani kroi mai darish behu. So says the Gemara, Savar lo kiha, de ki asa Rav Dimi, Omar. He says as follows. What did they say about this? That Omar Amre b'ma'ar Rava, Nahor anane, if the clouds are somewhat clear, Ze'irin mohi, there are small amounts of water. Chashoch anane, if they're blackened clouds, if they're dark clouds, Sagyan mohi, then they have a sufficient or a significant amount of water. And that is how we understand chashkas maim and chashras maim. The chashkas, of course, is darker. Chashras is going to be lighter. Says the Gemara, quarter of the way down, Keman Azla, let's try again. Keman Azla, Hadetanya, what about the following brisa? Maimel yonim b'ma'amar heim teluyim, that the waters of the heavens are only standing where they are because the Kadosh Baruch Hu has commanded them to do so. Upeirosehem, and the fruits of that water, of the Mayim Elyonim, is Meg Shamim, Shenemar, Mipri Masecha Tispa Haaretz. Who does that work according to? Obviously, Kiman, that's Ki Rabbi Yoshua. How does Rabbi Eliezer answer this? Rabbi Eliezer, what does he say? That's only talking about Brias Ha'olam, no problem at all. It's not talking about regularly, it's only talking about the creation of the world. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi called the Olam Kula Mitamtzes Gan Eden Husho, said the whole world benefits only from that which is left in the initial container, that which is left in the clouds from the initial rain. So that's Gan Eden gets most of the rain, and whatever's left in the container goes out to the rest of the world. Shenemar v'nar Yotze mi Eden, that the river exits from Eden. Of course, the pasuk is somewhat homiletical because we don't get rain directly from a nahar. It has to first be evaporated into cloud form. Fine. Tana mitamtzis. We have a brisa that says something similar. Mitamtzis base course shoset tirkav, that from the remnants of the water left over in a container that you use for a base core, which is a large plot of land, shoset tirkav, you can water a smaller plot of land, a much smaller plot of land. We had this language earlier, trey kabin. We had the language of tarkab is actually a measurement of size. Fine. 2 dots, 1/3 of the way down. Tanu Rabbanan. Eretz Mitzrayim. Havya Daled Meos Parsa. Al Daled Meos Parsa. Eretz Mitzrayim is a square. 400 parsa square. Vihu, and that is Echad Mishishim Bekush, is 1/60th of the area of Kush. The Kush Echad Mishishim Ba'olam. Kush is 1/60th the size of the world. Ba'olam Echad Mishishim Began. We learned in previous Maseches that Gan and Eden are different locations. Gan be Eden. We were saying Gan Eden all the time. So the Gemara says that that's not correct. There's the Gan, and Vegan is Echad Mishishim LeEden. The Gan is 1/60th of the sides of Eden. Ve'eden Echad Mishishim LeGehenim. Wow, that's not a very comforting feeling. And says the Gemara, Nimtza, what does it then look like? Kola olam kulo kekisu iktera leGehenim. It seems that all of us, we live here in this world, we're like a little teapot, like the kettle can be huge, a little covering on the top. That's what Olam says. Why is it? Why are we the covering? Why aren't we the spout? Fine for the Meforshim to explain. Some say that there is no maximum size of Gehenim, and it's not 60 times larger. It's infinitely larger. Some say that the Bryce is actually flipped. It's not Gehenim that has no shear, but it's Eden. Fine. What does the pasuk mean when it says Shochant al Mayim Rabim? Al-Mayim Rabim, Amar Rab, Asira Bavel. Bavel is very rich. That's what the pasuk is referring to. Shochant al-Mayim Rabim, that it's sitting on a lot of water. Dechatzda, they can be wealthy below Mitra without any water, or they live in a valley, so the water just runs right by them. The Euphrates, whatever rivers were right there, so they were able to have access to water without a lot of rain. And they were. Thank you very much. Mi garam lebavel shiu otzrosehem leos bar. Who is it that caused? This is what the pasuk was referring to. Who is it that caused Bavel to have male otzroseha, that it was so full? Have omer mibnesha shochenes al mayim rabim, because it is dwelling in very fertile land. And Omar Rab, Asira Bavel is considered rich, the chasta below mitra, because they don't even need the rain. They're rich without any water because it doesn't have to rain for them. They're fine. They're at the bottom of the hill. Amar Abai Naktinan, we have a tradition, Tovani velo Yovshani, that Bavel is a place that's saturated with rain. It's more swamp-like. Velo Yovshani, it's not the kind of place that dries out because gravity pulls water down. And that is what they were like. That brings us to a new Mishnah halfway down. Says the new Mishnah, remember that we said in the beginning of the Masechta that Shoal and Esagashamim means the same Talumatar Libracha. We're almost there. We're almost there. In fact, today is quite a remarkable day, as we will discuss shortly once we get to the Gemara. The Gimel b'Mar Cheshvan, on the 3rd of Mar Cheshvan, in Eretz Yisrael at least, they should start saying the same Talmud Matzor Livracha. Rabbi Gamliel Omer b'Shivabo. It has to be on the 7th. Why does it have to be on the 7th? It has to be Tesvav Yom Achar HaChag. It has to be 15 days after the end of Sukkot. Why? So that the people who are traveling the furthest distance to get to Eretz Yisrael could get home, and that can take up to 2 weeks. The Gemara opens, fine. Let's see how we paskin with Eretz Yisrael. Do we paskin like the Tanakama who says that the date of V'sein Talmud Livracha is the 3rd of Mar Cheshvan, or do we paskin like Rabbi Gamliel that it's the 7th? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar Halachik Rabbi Gamliel that it is the 7th. But all of that is in Eretz Yisrael. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Chananya Omer uvegola ad shishim bitkufa, 60 days into the season. When is the actual date of fall? It's September 22nd. So 21st, 22nd? 21st. 60 days is today. So let's see what the Gemara says. Uvegola ad shishim bitkufa. 60 days should be today. So I don't know if you heard Tzvi Sheir screaming from the rooftops this morning about this gorgeous raid that Reb Shuli Bornstein had on this. I'll send it around later. Absolutely gorgeous. He explains the whole thing as to why we wait until December 4th and not today. It should be mamish today. There was a time in history when they changed the calendar. I don't even want to ruin it for you. Absolutely gorgeous. Just happens to be that tonight is exactly that time. Exactly. Do we include the 60th day? That's the next question of the Gemara.
If it was December 4th, I mean, the 60 days wouldn't calculate, you wouldn't have Daf Yomi on December 4th. It's all calculated for.
Correct. Absolutely right.
Built for the cycle.
100%. Shirley said the same thing. You're in good company. He said the same thing. So let's see what the Gemara says. That it says, Amar Rav Huna Bar Chia, Amar Shmuel, Halacha Kechananya, that we paskin like Hananya, that we should start saying the same Matar Livracha really on the 60th day, which is now. Any says the Gemara, is that true? Hold on one second. Somebody asked Shmuel, from when do we start mentioning and davening with the bracha of She'ela V'sein Talamatar? Amar Lahu, when the wood is brought in, Lebei Tavus Rishba, into the house of Tavus, who was a Rishba, a bird collector, a bird watcher. Says the Gemara, that's not a good question at all. Who says that that's any different than our 60-day mark? Dilma, not a problem at all. That's easy. Says the Gemara, what about the 60th day itself? The way we would say it in the learning world is, do we say ad bichlal or ad shelo ad bichlal? Day 60. Which one? Is day 60 part of the count, and therefore we have to start counting earlier? Or no, is day 60 not part of the count, and we start by saying Talim Matal Vracha on 61? Yom Shishim Kilifnei Shishim. Oh, Kilachar Shishim. Is day 60 treated like day 59, in which case we don't say the same Talim Matar? Or is it treated like day 61, in which case we do Tashma? The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, a little bit more. Rav Amar Yom Shishim Kila Achar Shishim. Rav is strict. Rav says that we treat day 60 like day 61, and therefore we have one more day of the same Talamata Libracha. Ushmuel Amar Yom Shishim Kilifnei Shishim, that it's actually a little bit more lenient. And the Gemara is going to say, yeah, sure. They're both on their party lines. It depends where they live. Rav spent a part of his life in Eretz Yisrael, and Shmuel spent all of his life in Bavel. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak V'Simanech. How do we know who said what? It says the Gemara, Eloi Bo'maya, those who live up in the mountains, they're going to want to daven even a little earlier. That's Rav, who lived in Eretz Yisrael, a mountainous area. But Tatoi, those who live down below, namely those who live in Bavel, namely Shmuel, Lo Ba'umaya, he doesn't want to daven for water, so he's fine. He's fine. Everybody's davening the way that they want to the 60th day. Amar al Papa Hilchas Hayom Shishim Kila Achar Shishim. We paskin that it is la'achar shishim, that we treat the day 60 as 61, and therefore we should say the same Talamata Libracha. Again, as to why we don't, I will send you a clip a little bit later. New Mishnah, Higiya Yud Zayin b'Mar Cheshvan v'lo yardu geshamim. What happens if we get to the 17th of Cheshvan and there's no rain? So it says the Gemara, Hischilu hayechidim mis'anen gimel tainios. The special people, the yechidim, all right, not regular people, the special people. We'll see what the parameters are of that. They have to fast 3 fasts. Bahab, as we will see, the Gemara's source for Bahab is right here. Although the Bahab that we do is more calendarized than this. This is episodic. It just depends on the rain. Says the Gemara. However, this fast, much as it should be fasted these 3 days by the Yechidim, Ochlan v'Shosin Mishecha Shecha, it doesn't start at night. You can eat at night. And as well, the normal inuyim that we're used to on Yom Kippur don't apply. Mutarim b'malacha, u'virachitzo v'sicha, u'v'nila sasandel v'tash meshamita. There's no restrictions on malacha, on showering, on anointing, on wearing leather, sandals, whatever the case may be, or with tash meshamita. Higia Rosh Chodesh Kislev lo yardu geshamim. 13 days later, now we're all the way at the end of the month, and now it's Rosh Chodesh Kislev, no rain yet. So then Bezdin goes and shalosh tanios al tzibur. At that point, the whole tzibur has to fast 3 fasts, and as well, the same halacha that applies here applies to the previous fast. Ochlan v'Shosim Mishecha Shecha. That doesn't, you can eat at night, no problem. And as well, like before, Mutarim b'malacha v'rachitza v'sicha v'nila sasan of tash meshamita. There are no restrictions in regards to malacha, washing yourself, anointing yourself, wearing leather shoes, or with marital relations. So says the Gemara that in the beginning of the Mishnah, if we got to the 17th of Cheshvan, that we would then be obligated for the Yechidim to fast. Who are the Yechidim? Says the Gemara, Man Yechidim, 6 lines from the bottom, at the open of the Gemara, Yudam and Aleph. Who are these people? Amar Rav Huna Rabbanan. These are the greats. These are the Rabbanim Chashubim, the poskim. It should be Bahab. Monday, Thursday, Monday. Says the Gemara, that was unnecessary. Why did you tell me that it's Monday, Thursday, Monday, Rav Huna? My Kamashmalan, Tanina, we already learned it in a Mishnah. We're going to learn this a little bit later. Says the Gemara, the Meforshim say it's on Daf Tesvav. We'll get there in 5-6 days. And goes in Taanis al tzibur b'tchila b'chamishi. We don't have fast days on Thursdays when we are pulling one out of a hat because of a rain. Why not? Shelo lahafkiyas hasha'arim. We were afraid that people were going to up the prices in the market. Yeah, the best way to go shopping is on an empty stomach, right? Because I do this all the time. I always buy a lot of extra stuff when I'm hungry. So that you should eat before you go to the store. It will save you. Go out to a restaurant. It'll save you a lot of money. It's a great idea. So it says the Gemara, we know how people work, and therefore we cannot have a fast start on a Thursday. Because if someone's going to be fasting on Thursday, they're going to be shopping for Shabbos, and then everyone's going to jack up the prices. Ella Shalosh Taanios Harishona Sheni v'Chamishi v'Sheni. So therefore, if the Mishnah says that already, why then do I need the Shita of Rav Huna to say that it's Bahab? I know it's Bahab. I know it's a Monday, Thursday, Monday fasting system. Ma'udatema, the Gemara responds 3 lines from the bottom. No, we needed his statement. Ma'udatema, I might have thought Hani Milit Tzibur. That's only true with the Seifa of the Mishnah, that once we've gotten to the month of Kislev, then we say, because it's the whole Tzibur, then we have Bahab. Aval Yachid Lo, that it's not the case, Kamash Malan, that even by a Yachid, we would still need the same guidelines of Bahab so that we don't up the price even for one person. And Tanya Nami Halchi, the Bryce agrees, that we do Bahav even by Yechidim. Umafsikim b'roshei chodashim. However, even if you're doing Bahav, if the bays or the hay or the bays, if that Monday, Thursday, Monday ended up falling out, Umafsikim b'roshei chodashim, or Yamim Tovim Maksuvim Megillas Taanis, as we've spoken about already, is Megillas Taanis still applicable? We learned about this machlokas, and all of these days, if it fell out on the Bahav, then you no longer have to fast. Take a look at Rashi. Was it Rashi? Yeah, it's the Rashi from the bottom of the previous page. Sorry. Rashi in the bottom of the previous page. Then we don't do that fast anymore. That's what the Gemara is implying. Very good. New connected sugya, top of Yudam base, top line, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us. Al Yomar Adam. A person should not be so self-deprecating. Talmud ani, I'm only a student. Any ro'li osi yachid. Remember what our Mishnah said, that if it's a really bad scenario, there's no rain until the 17th of Cheshvan, then a yachid should fast. I'm not on such a caliber. Says the Gemara. Don't say that about yourself. Any ro'li no. Ela kol talmid chacham yichidim. Everyone who is a talmid chacham, everyone who is the student of a chacham, they are begeder yichidim. What are each of these terms? Ezu yachid ve'ezu talmid. So says the Gemara. Yachid. A yachid is a person whose level of learning is so significant that they are appointed as the rav of a community. You're talking about a dayan, you're talking about a massive Talmud Chacham who's holding in Shas and Poskim. Talmud, how do we define a Talmud Chacham? A Talmud is kol sheshalin oso dvar halacha bilimudo, that they're learning a particular sugya, and you can talk with them and learning, and they can answer. Masechta kala, not dikala, but Masechta kala, it's Maseches kala. That's what a reference to the Masechta itself. And that's what the Gemara is saying, is if a person has enough cup that if you're learning, let's say you're learning Daf Yomi, you go to the store, you bump into someone, oh yeah, I learned the sugya about the rain in Eretz Yisrael. You can talk and learning. You're already begeder yechidim. You're in the category of a Talmud Chacham as it relates to this din, and you should therefore not be self-deprecating. You can fast to help the people. Says the Gemara Brisa number 2 on this topic, 8 lines down, Yudam and Beis. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us, lo kol harotz lasos atzma yachid ose Talmud ose. Lo kol harotz lasos atzmo yachid ose Talmud ose divrei Rab Meir. You're not always going to be that person. You cannot always choose to be the yachid or to be the Talmud. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Amar ose. V'zachur latov, you did a good job. You're going to be mentioned for good. If you're going to show how chashuv you are, so then it's different if you're going to be choosing something that's enjoyable. I get to sit on the dais. I made myself into a chashuv rav. Okay, then that's disingenuous. However, if you're doing it for tsar, you're fasting. Nobody likes fasting. So then already that's fine. And another brisa Tanyidach, the brisa writes 12 lines down, Lo kol harotz lasos atzmo yachid ose Talmud ose. You cannot put yourself in that category. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, and then dissenting opinion, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer b'med dvar mamur b'dvar shel shevach. That's only when it's very enjoyable. It's praiseworthy. Aval b'dvar shel tsar, when you're talking about a fast, ose, he can put himself in that category. V'zachur latov, and that's a good thing. She'ein shevach hu lo el tsar hu lo, and therefore it is acceptable. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us third of the way down, Yudam and Beis. Tana Rabbanan, Misha haya misane al hatzara ve'abra. A person says, I'm going to fast. A person, Rahman al-Litzlan, is sick. It's rain. We need rain, whatever the case may be. And the tzara was avra in the middle of the fast. You're so good at your job, all of a sudden the person is healed. For a person who's sick that you want to heal, you should finish your fast. Seems pretty obvious, but that's what the Gemara says. What if you are coming from a place where there is no fasting and you're going to a place where there is fasting? You have to take on the chumras of the makom that you're going to. This has to do with minhagim. That if you have a minhag in your place that's different than the one you're going to, you take on shtei chumras, the chumras of your place and their place. And therefore, the reverse is also true halfway down. If where you live they're fasting, you go to a city where they aren't fasting, then you should still fast. Let's say that a person eats and they forget and they're drinking.
So in the first case, there doesn't really make a difference where you are.
Nope. When you're moving from place A to place B, it doesn't matter what the,
No, B
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because you take the chumras from both places. That's correct. The Gemara is just articulate. They could have just said, why didn't the Gemara just say that? And elsewhere in Shas, this is discussed as well. I think in Psachim we discussed it. There's a minhag makom. There's a Mishnah there somewhere that speaks about minhag makom and whatever.
The minhag makom is not going to help if you've got the chumrah from place A.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's what the Gemara is saying. Is you have to embrace that minhag, whatever it is, whatever the chumrah is. If you're coming from chumrah, you can't eat. If you're going to chumrah, you also can't eat. They're both the same din. So let's say a person forgets that they're fasting and they eat and drink. Al yisra bifnei atzibur. They should not show themselves publicly. You shouldn't show anything enjoyable. Why do you look so upset? Amar lehem Yaakov lebanav al tiru be'asmechem kshatem sivein lo bifnei Esav lo bifnei Shmuel kadesha lo yiskanu bachem. We understand the psychology. It's not nice. Don't eat in front of people. So I almost never fast except for Yom Kippur, maybe Tisha B'av, but usually I don't fast at all. That's the psak I got. Okay, so like you don't eat like a corned beef sandwich in front of everybody. It's rude. Just eat what you have to eat in private. It's not nice. Fine. Says the Gemara, continuing in drushos, they're really unrelated to the sugya. We've learned a little bit more than halfway down. Al tirgezu baderech. What does that mean? Al tirgezu baderech. Don't get angry. Amar Rebbe Lazar. Amar lahem Yosef le'echav. Al tisasku b'dvar halacha. Let's not walk in learning. Let's not talk and walk in learning. Shema tirgezu, that's the pasuk, al tirgezu baderech, that maybe you'll get upset aleichem haderech. Says the Gemara, Eini, you're not supposed to learn when you're traveling. We all know that you're supposed to learn when you're traveling. V'amar Rabbi Loi, bar brachia, shnei talmidei chachamim shemehalchem haderech, ve'en b'neim Torah, ve'en b'neim divrei Torah. Two people are walking and they're not learning. Says the Gemara, really sarif. That's not a good consequence. You can get burnt. Shene'emar v'hihema holchem v'diber v'hinei rachav eish v'susei eish v'yafridu ben shneim. Story with Elio and Elisha, and all of a sudden they see this chariot of fire up in the heavens. A famous story. Taima. The reason why they didn't get burnt is the Ika Dibur, because they were talking and learning. Haleka Dibur ruin l'sarif. So what do we see? How can you tell me that the pasuk Ba'al Tirgezu means not to learn? Hare, we see that the only reason that they didn't end up getting burnt is because they were learning. Says the Gemara, Lokasha, Halamigras Aliyuni. There's different kinds of learning. One is the Migras, the Girsa. You're just plowing through Mishnayos Balpeh. That's fine. To talk and learning like that is not a problem. Haliyune. But if you're talking about Mamish and Iyun Sugya, it's very nuanced. It's Shulchan Aruch and Shachs and Tazes, and it's Badei Shulchan and all the poskim. You're going through everything. That's a whole different level. You should be learning, seemingly from the Gemara, that which is a little bit less entrancing. Says the Gemara, 15 lines from the bottom, a person should not take very wide steps. And when you are approaching a city, you should approach the city while the sun is still out. Let's talk about both of these pieces. What does it mean not to take big steps? Will tell us that when a person takes big steps, it removes from them, it takes 1/500th of the brilliance of your eyes. What about the second part, that you should show up in a city when the sun is still up? What does he say? Yehuda Marav says, a person should go out begeder kitov v'yikanes, and they should enter a city of kitov. Vayomar Hashem kitov. That's when the sun is out. Shenemar aboker or b'anashim shalchu. Fine. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab Chia Hamahalech baderech al yosar mishnei re'avon. You should not eat any more than you would in times of famine. My time, and here we have a machlokas, 2 lines from the bottom. Hacha. In our community, people said targimu mishum ma'ayna, just to make sure that your stomach can handle everything. Your stomach can be a little bit more fragile when you're traveling. The ma'arava, that was in Babel. In Eretz Yisrael, what did they say? Amri mishum izone. It was because of the volume of available food. They had to ration. You don't always know when you're going to have enough food. My beinaihu. What is the difference between these two shitas about making sure we eat a minimal amount? Top of Yud Aleph and Aleph, the yasid va'arba. You're sitting in a boat. If you're sitting in a boat, no problem of you running around like a crazy guy. You're sitting on a boat. The boat's moving. You're fine. You can eat whatever you want. But if the concern is rationing, then even if you're sitting in a boat, that would be one distinction. Or maybe the problem is that you're going from inn to inn, knowing that you will have constant food, but you have to be concerned about your stomach because you're running around. So the Gemara gives 2 nafkaminos. Rav Papa called Parsu Parsa Achel Chad Rifta. Every time he walked to Parsa, he'd eat another loaf of bread. Because he was of the opinion that it was only about the stomach, and that was it. He didn't have to worry about portions. We're going to stop right here and pick up tomorrow with Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Ruchim to you.